Hi everyone in Cloud Computing, and welcome to episode 12 of the Cloud Computing Training Show with Brad Nelson and internationally recognised and world's #1 industry expert and thought leader, David Linthicum. This show is sponsored by Nelson Hilliard, cloud computing recruitment specialist placing great people in cloud, IoT, fintech and AI. This week we're excited to have Ed Featherston as our special guest. Ed is Vice President and Principal Architect at Cloud Technology Partners. Hi Dave, and a warm welcome Ed. Great to have you both on the show this week.
Great to be here.
Yep. Thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Ed. In this week's show, we'll be talking about it's not which public cloud should you use. It's more about what you do after you've chosen the provider. So, Dave, over to you on this one. This is a great topic that we've got.
Yeah, this is one of those topics where I think the editor took a license with the title, ended up, don't worry about selecting the wrong public cloud, which is the one in InfoWorld, and that wasn't what it's all about. Really, this is about the fact that in many instances, we have the clouds thrust upon us. And so in other words, when we join a company, and Ed knows this as well as I do, there's technopolitics, and they may do a deal with one cloud provider because they have special credits with them versus another cloud provider, and then you're asked to, in essence, be successful with something that may not be optimal for what you're looking to do. So what I'm not saying, which I got criticized for this on LinkedIn, is I'm not telling you to pick the wrong public cloud if you have a choice in it. What I'm saying is that it's survivable if you're dealing with cloud-based systems that you haven't, that you didn't pick, because reality is that if you put enough time and money into most of these, they're going to work just fine. You know, whether it's the top, typically in the top 6 players, and now we're down to about 6, including IBM and Oracle, and it's not going to be optimal for what you're looking to do, but it's going to be fine. Now, the reason this is in the training show is the fact of the matter is that a critical success factor is your ability to kind of train on a dime and get a group of people who are up to speed on the particular cloud provider that you're looking to do. Because while everybody has, the skills in the major cloud providers, Amazon's, of course, the big 800-pound gorilla, and that's great, and I understand why they have that. You may be facing Oracle, you may be facing IBM, or you may be facing somebody else. And you need to be able to turn on a dime and figure out how those clouds work, versus running around complaining about how it's not the optimal cloud, you didn't pick it, all those sorts of things. Because the reality is, here's what happens with Global 2000 companies. They make decisions not necessarily based on the best technology. They make decisions based on the best business model they're able to provide. However, you're armed with training. And training is very cool because you can get people up to speed and leveraging whatever technology to be successful in it. In reality is I've seen everybody be successful with the 6 cloud technologies, obviously not optimal. But when it comes down to kind of infrastructure as a service, if you have storage that's functional and works well and has use-based accounting, governance, and security around it, and you have compute with the same sort of attributes, you're really halfway home. You may be missing machine learning, maybe missing identity access management, but you can piece part those things at third-party providers and still be successful with the cloud deck the cloud cards that you're dealt. What do you think about this, Ed?
No, I agree 100%. Like you say, I mean, we've both been there where we've walked in and the cloud decision was already made before the actual requirements were laid down as to what it was you wanted to do with the cloud. It's just the classic, we want to go to the cloud. Why? Because everybody's going to the cloud. And so we struck a deal with Amazon or we struck a deal with Azure. So now let's go with it because we've picked that technology. And like you said, if you pick any of the big ones, from a functional perspective, some of them do some things better than others, but ultimately they all provide the same kind of functionality. And as long as you're picking a workload that will do well in the cloud, you can make it work on just about any of their platforms. And what it comes down to, I think the training is a really good point, and it's one of the things that recently came up with a client I was working with where they actually were doing the right thing of they've picked the workload first, and then they asked us to come in and help them figure out which one of the clouds would be the right one for our workload, our people, our culture, and lay down the key things that were important to them so that, you could sit down and say, okay, well, you could do it on all, and the top 3 were in play. And it's like you could do it on all 3, but here are the different trade-offs. I'm a big fan of saying everything's a trade-off. There's never a perfect solution. It's a matter of which trade-offs you're willing to accept. And one of the key ones was training and skill sets of the skill sets that people had, the skill sets that would be available to them to start onboarding in order to be able to go to the cloud. And that became a very key decision point for them as to which one of the platforms they ended up landing on.
Yeah, and I've seen many times where people will pick a cloud provider and not have the native skill sets for that provider. And also, by the way, move in a different direction than I think is politically acceptable for the people in the organization. So in other words, if they're a Microsoft shop and that's all they lived and breathed over the last 20 years, and suddenly we're making them go to AWS, AWS obviously supports Windows, they may balk at that. They may find that that's undesirable based on the fact that they have existing Microsoft technologies. Their DevOps stuff is based on Microsoft. Those guys probably have Microsoft tattoos on their arms. I mean, it's when you get into a hardcore Microsoft shop, it's pretty hardcore. Or if you get into an open source shop and you get into an Amazon shop and you get into an IBM shop, they have similar kind of desires. And the reality is that it's okay to move in that direction, because if we're going to be unsuccessful in changing hearts and minds, as well as the skill sets in the organization, the time we're looking to change it, then ultimately it's going to be a failure, even though we're picking the most optimal solution that's there. So it's funny. It's like, you and I have technical degrees, but we should have got a psychology degree. I think would have been more helpful in the, kind of field that we chose, because in many instances I end up, dealing with human aspects of this, political aspects of this, more so than the technology. What I tell them is the same thing you do. It's all trade-offs. And by the way, I can do anything with enough money and time. So we're going to be successful. Hopefully we'll make an optimal amount of expenditure and optimal amount of time to get you there. But the reality is that, you're going to have to pick the technology that's going to be right for your particular business and right for your culture, right for your mix, things like that. And if you go in another direction, then it's just going to cost you more, add risks, things like that. I think people are getting that now. So we're not getting this, line in the sand where it's my way or the highway with technology. I never understood that, why people used to get polarized around technology. But we do. And it seems to be an industry trend that seems to be accelerating as time goes on. And look to your skill sets, look to your training plan, look to your skills mix, look to your infrastructure, look to your biases, look to your DevOps, look to your dev test and operations environments, and see what you're being successful with. And it's okay to continue with that vendor, and you're going to make it work, and not necessarily, raise hackles up just because we're not on Amazon or on another, maybe something that's in third place or fourth place versus number one.
No, you raised a really good point. One of the things I was thinking of is I had a colleague of mine, a business architect, that years ago had once said to me, there's only so many patterns in the world. Technology underneath them might change, but the patterns you're implementing don't. And a point you raised made me think of it, because I could take a pattern, and you could take just about any technology, and you can make it work in that technology. Whether it's optimum to do that or not is a different question. And comes into the level of efforts and how much work you have to do to make it happen and all of the above. And a lot of it does ultimately end up coming down to non-technical reasons for going forward with things. And a lot of it is cultural based, it's training based, it's skill set based, and like you say, internal politics based. And the technology has very little to do with it when it comes out the other end.
Yeah, and we saw this before. I mean, we've seen this movie before. I mean, the open source movement, 10 years ago, people started moving in that direction. And I get it. I understand why we're going to move to open source. But guess what? If they're not currently an open source environment, platform, then it's okay to move with Microsoft. It's okay to move with IBM or other more proprietary technologies. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree wholeheartedly. We've seen this story so many times before over the decades with different types of technologies that, people say this is going to be, client server was one of them, open source was one of them, where it's going to solve world hunger and make everything go away and make life so much easier. Ultimately, it comes down to what do you need from a business perspective to get done? That's what your real goal is. One of my favorite phrases is technology isn't the destination, it's the vehicle. Figure out where you want to go first, then you figure out what vehicle you need to get there.
Yeah, and I think that the great thing about cloud computing versus making an investment in on-premise technology where you have to buy software load up the tapes, load up the DVDs, all the things we had to do in the past. We can just use it as a consumption model. And guess what? If we don't like ultimately the cloud provider that we had, we can move into a multi-cloud model and do a nice little dance over to the new cloud over time and leverage their technologies mixed with the cloud technology that we picked already. In other words, everything's fixable down the line. We can make adjustments. And of course, if people will go, well, it's not optimal. Nothing's optimal. I think that you can't go with a particular single cloud provider and look at everything optimal in the system. They're going to have something that you don't need, that don't meet your requirements, and some things you do. Right. And you can obviously go with a vendor that's going to be better than others and go through a best of breed, technology selection. But we're going to end up picking technology that's going to go in an odd direction. Perhaps the company is sold. Perhaps the company divests the services that you use. They shut them down because they're not making money on them anymore. There's a lot of risk that kind of goes into that. And so my best advice to people who get into these situations is think in terms of agility. So in other words, think in terms of having the ability to change your architecture, put volatility into a domain, put training into a domain, and be able to shift your skill sets and be able to shift your technology as you need it and get your people aligned directly with the technology. So what's funny, when I hire people, I don't hire them for what they know now as much as I do as their ability to learn. I talk to them about how quickly they can get new skills and adapt to different kinds of technologies coming up and learn quickly on the fly and be kind of self-taught and self-motivated. And I think that that's far more valuable than people who are drop-dead skilled in a particular set of technology, but by the way, can never transfer that skill in another direction.
No, you hit a really good point there. It's a conversation I have a lot. I participate in a tweet chat during the week, CIO chat, and one of the topics that comes up all the time is what you look for when you're hiring people and how do you get the right skill sets and everything. And one of the ones that always bubbles to the top is the ability to learn something new. Nowadays, knowing a technology is not enough because the technology is going to be constantly changing. If you can't learn and adapt and be ready to turn on a dime, then you're eventually going to get left behind, so that the people you want working for you are the ones that can learn the stuff fast and are able to adapt and learn the new technology and keep moving forward.
So Brad, from a recruiting standpoint, what's your opinion on this stuff?
Well, you guys have raised some very interesting points, actually. Excuse me. Just going back to the choice of cloud and why and what you want to do with it, I think Ed and yourself did highlight some great points about identifying workloads, but also at the same point mitigating the risk of business fluidity with making sure there is almost zero latency with that transfer over to a platform that either politically works for the business or works from a training point of view, or it becomes an asset to the business as opposed to a huge training issue. So I thought that what you mentioned, those guys, was absolutely spot on. It really is down to what's your workloads looking like and why and what do you need to do with them, and equally how many boxes for cloud actually need to be ticked, because as you said, not every cloud platform is going to do everything you want it to do. So identifying the main points and the main workloads and the main training issues will, you'd like to think, at least mitigate some risk within the organisation and continue that fluidity of business. But moving on to the current topic with the training and the forward thinking of insight into technology and being able to turn on a dime or a dollar, I think is essential. And it's certainly a conversation that I actually enjoy having with people that are very well versed, whether it be in architecture or DevOps or whatever it would be, is how adaptable they are to situations and their learning capacity to not only learn something but actually implement it. And I think that's really important. So, having those dialogues, having the conversations, understanding where they're at now and where their forte is at, but equally, how quickly can they learn? And what are the examples on what they have learned and implemented, and who would be the best person to speak to for that to be demonstrated? I mean, anyone can talk a good talk, but, I like to actually have dialogue with other people. Who are your users? Who have you worked for? Who have you mentored on this? Who mentored you? What would they say about you you as being someone they've mentored, you know, and getting a game like that, you can really catch people out if someone's just trying to talk a good talk because, oh, guess what? There's another shiny object in the room, and someone's just copied and pasted blockchain 20 times on their CV, you know. So essentially, I do like to try and, you know, I'm not out there to catch people out, but it would be wrong for me to bring someone to an organisation without an investigative approach into finding out more about their adaptability, their future skill set, as well as their learning curve to adopt that skill set.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. So, Ed, in closing the show out, like, what are the top 3 things that you would recommend to an enterprise that's moving to a particular cloud, but is unsure that they're picking the right cloud?
Well, part of it is hopefully, if they haven't picked the cloud yet, look at your workload and your needs first. If you've already picked the cloud, then look towards your people and their abilities to learn or be trained or understand the technology, because they're ultimately going to be responsible when you're trying to move that workload over, and will ultimately determine whether you're successful or not on it. And the third one is making sure that either way that you've picked workloads that are actually going to benefit from the cloud. I've seen clients at various points pick a workload that it's not a scalable application. It's not going to play nice in the cloud, and lifting and shifting it over into the cloud accomplishes nothing except somebody can put the checkbox next to it and say, yes, we moved our application to the cloud.
That's good advice.
That's great. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you being part of the show this week. Thanks, Ed. It's great to have you on board as our special guest.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I hope you'll invite me back sometime.
Absolutely. That was a great show. Thanks very much. And David, thanks so much for your time this week on the show. As always, it's an absolute pleasure.
It's absolutely a pleasure to explain my obviously confusing article. Thank you.
Well, I did read the article, so I ignored the title. I understood what you were trying to say, David.
No one actually reads the article, Ed, so they just read the title and they start throwing in bombs.
I have that battle with people all the time.
Yeah, excellent. So it's my bad on this one because I introduced the show with that title. Although I did read the article and I thought it was I did think it was a bit off, but I thought, well, we'll lead on to something. I'm sure the topic will come up in the show somewhere. So that's funny all around, really. So thanks, guys. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this week's training show. Although the title was slightly misleading to the content, but nevertheless, we got there in the end, and I think there were some very interesting points covered off. So thanks for watching again, and if you'd like to follow Ed on Twitter, you can reach him at Ed Featherston. David's on Twitter as well, which is David Linthicum, and I'm on Twitter also, which is @_Nelson Hilliard. Thanks for watching, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel so you can stay ahead of all the new videos coming up. Thanks very much.